Welcome back guys, Carboss here, back with another video where we talk about cards, money investing. And today's video is episode 3 of our By the Numbers mini-series where we're going to discuss grading, specifically how grading changed the way I invested in sports cards. Alright, let's go. We all know what grading is all about. Officially, it's authentication, preservation, encapsulation, appraising, call it what you want. Most people associate grading as value creation, in short, money making, or at least that's how it was in the beginning. Let's zoom back to December 2019. It's now close to 6 months since I started my sports card investing journey, and all I have purchased so far were graded cards. Now, it was not a bad thing, as the quote-unquote mantra was buy graded, as is certain. You get a quality that you pay for, which, by the way, it's not necessarily true all the time. And there is plenty of comps, plus there's no dispute of the condition when you arrive. PSA 10 is a PSA 10 versus to what is used, near mint, brand new, and all of that when you buy raw cards. But as I slowly started to accumulate my card portfolio, something didn't feel right. This was way too slow. Investing is never a quick fire thing, right? Think of S&P 500, it's a long game for sure. Now, I then started to research on why the discrepancies between the value of raw cards and graded cards, be it a PSA 9, a PSA 10. And I found out at a time that there was a lot of value created in between. For illustration, a raw card, costing say $40 can turn into $100 or $120 if you sprinkle some magic dust called PSA. Sounds like something interesting, right? But there was a challenge. You see, as what I mentioned before, raw cards came in various conditions. The photos that you see on eBay can only give you that much information, and ultimately, the probability of a card not meeting a minimum PSA 9 standard is actually very, very great. So, meaning if I bought just 1 or 2 cards to send to PSA and it came back anything but a 10, I would be losing money. So I sat down and started to think, right? So how many PSA 10s would I need to break even on a submission? So let's do some math here. Say a raw card was $50 and a PSA 10 was $150. A PSA 9 would work out roughly to be the price of a raw. So let's say it's $50, which means that if you send a card in to PSA and got back a 9, you kind of lose a bit of money. So with grading fees at the time, 2019, I had 2 options, the slow version at $10 or the average at $20. So let's just go with the average, right? Therefore, if I send in 10 cards, my total cost would be $50 for the card, $20 for the fees, multiplied by 10, totaling $700. Therefore, to break even, I need to at least get, say, 2 PSA 10s and 8 PSA 9s, which equates to 20% gem rate. That doesn't sound so bad, right? I could do 20%. But what about the raw cards that I bought that didn't meet the minimum standards to send to PSA? Well, I wasn't going to send those in, obviously. And if I sold those back on eBay, I'd probably make a loss, a small loss. So let's say I could sell them back for $40, making a $10 loss. Hence, my math needed to extend further on the probability of the wastage here, like how many cards that couldn't meet the standards. But to tackle potential wastages is rather easy. To reduce the chances of the wastage, just pick raw cards that were better quality and had stronger chances with grading, while it holds good value. So enter 2019 Prism. Now, 2019 Prism cards were unique, the card stock was a decent quality, compared to those paper thin cards on the 90s. With that, you could roughly identify issues such as the corners and edges pretty easily from the photos. And if you weren't sure, you could always ask for more photos from the seller. Centering on a 2019 Prism is slightly tricky, but if you use what I call the dot test, that was a method of getting the centering to at least 70-30 or close to 60-40 on the front that you needed for a PSA 10. And lastly came the surface, which most of the time needed confirmation from the seller because it's not really to see, not easy to see through the photos, right? So sometimes you get a reply, sometimes you don't. So it kind of depends on yourself to decide if you still wanted to pull the trigger in hopes that the surface is fine, without any scratches or scuffs that you can't clean. And it's a risk that you take on the surface, considering that if it actually takes off all the other boxes, such as centering corners and edges. So there we are. I put together a recipe, which hasn't been tried before, tested, and my candidate of choice was Zion Williamson. right? The 2019 Prism-based rookie card. Now, in December 2019, Zion was still nursing an injury and has yet to play in his rookie season. So prices were still alright, but I knew this won't last long, as the whole NBA was awaiting Zion's entrance into the league. So this was now or never. The strategy was simple. I was going to purchase 20 of the best looking Zion Prisms I could find on eBay for around $40 to $50 each, and I would accept, say a 20% wastage rate, meaning I hope to yield at least 15 to 16 grade worthy quality cards. I would then send all these 15 cards to PSA at a regular submission rate of $20 each, bringing my total cost to be around $1,200 for everything, right? I expected to sell my wastages at a, say, 25% discount, yielding back maybe $150, and hence my net cost for 15 cards will be $1,000, $1,050, right? So if market prices held, I would need maybe just 3 PSA 10s and remaining 12 cards to get a minimum of PSA 9. And 3 out of 15 is that 20% gem rate, which seems very, very doable. So that's exactly what I did, and you can see from this table. So from this list, I went in for 21 Zion Prisms instead of the targeted 20. And you can see the dates here for the 20 of these Zions, which were purchased within a span of 2 days. There were a lot of Zions listed during this period, so it wasn't like I was buying them out or anything like that. But this sort of guerrilla approach for buying raw cards is one tiny tip you should consider when attacking a strategy like this. Now, having to spread your purchase, say, over 1 or 2 weeks just gives the market the opportunity to adjust its pricing when they realize that the amount of volume activity that has occurred, right? So, and this principle will carry in my other grading endeavors, one of which I discussed in my earlier videos, the 1996 Kobe Bryant Collector's Choice Thesis. So I got here 21 Zions, all purchased around the same time, and determined that a third of these Zions were a no-go. Now for records, I just kept things easy here by picking up the first 7 as in my spreadsheet, so it didn't actually mean that the first 7 Zion cards I purchased weren't good. Hence 14 cards made it to PSA, not the ratio I would have loved, considering that I expected only 20% wastage. Now, of course, by the time I received the cards, Zion had already taken a court. Prices of the raw has increased, which I actually sold back to eBay at a small profit. Now, bear in mind, this doesn't actually happen all the time, but it's an important factor to consider in my case study. So as you can see here, here's the actual PSA webpage on my initial submission. You can see the date received February 2020 and the date it was completed in May 2020. So I got a couple of Lucas here as well in my initial submission. These were all Chronicle Crusades, but part of this video's case study, we're going to look at the Zions that you can see here. And these were the results of the 14 Zions that I sent in. You can see number of PSA 10s here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 PSA 10s and 8 PSA 9s. So pretty amazing stuff on my first submission here, right? So let's break down the details. In summary, I did pretty well on my first submission to PSA with 6 PSA 10s and 8 PSA 9s, making up close to about 43% gem rate, way better than how I thought it would do. Of course, I caveat again, this is not always the case, but if you do this long enough, the average gem rate should be around 33%, which is slightly higher than my average over 30 months of 31.5%. Still not too bad, considering that you probably just need about 20 to 25% gem rate on your submissions to make a profit. And speaking of profit, here are the sales and profit numbers. Now, strictly on the Zions alone, I bankrolled in $3,600 in profit on an initial outlay of about $1,200, which is pretty fine, and that basically spearheaded a strategy in the months to come. Now, finding cards were great, buying raw cards more effectively and efficiently took precedence over buying the more stable PSA 10s to hold long term. I took more calculated risks on bulk purchases, with the intention to grade. Some worked out well, like these Zions here, but some went very poorly, of which an example I'll discuss in another video in this series. Now, one thing about this order, that it was completed right in the heat of the pandemic around March to April 2020, where sports cards were booming through factors like the stimulus checks and the last dance. So basically every sports card got a bump, and Zion was no different. He finished the season quite strong. And at one point, his base prisms were up to about $800 each. Now, I'm not complaining about my returns here. And in fact, it's these sort of returns that we are likely not able to see anytime soon again. Now, when people found out that grading was the way to gain the edge and build a bankroll, that's when there was a huge influx of cards into PSA, base cards, subsets, second year stuff. Now, all of that took a toll on the entire system that prompted PSA to shut down back in early 2021. Now, here we are a year later. people are getting back some of the junk stuff they submitted 12 or 14 months ago, not being able to cover the grading fees, which is pretty unfortunate that how grading was once viewed as a potential gold mine, it turned into mud water essentially. Now, there shouldn't be anyone complaining because the hobby evolves and people, has to keep up to that evolution as nothing stays forever constant. All right, that's all I have for today. Right, if you haven't already, please go back and watch the early episodes in this series. And if you enjoy it, please drop a like and subscribe if you want to follow for more. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. Cabos out.